Hello everybody, 6-Speed Dakota here, and today we're going to be doing number 3 in our Basics series. So, this is a situation that nobody likes to be in. You're driving to your summer vacation, wherever, it's a hot day out, and you look down at the gauges, and your temperature gauge is right at the hot. You're overheating. What do you do? So, this can be a serious issue. First thing you want to do is you want to get pulled over and get to probably the safest place you possibly can. If there's a truck pullout or something, make sure you do that. So, what I see a lot of people do, and I've seen a lot of people get hurt, is they go and they take the radiator cap off. Now, what the radiator cap, pressure cap does is it holds pressure in the cooling system. Because basic thermodynamic properties of water say that as the ambient pressure increases, so does the boiling point. So you could have liquid water in the cooling system that is beyond the boiling point at atmospheric pressure, but at its current pressure is still held as a liquid. So as soon as you take the cap off and you release all that pressure, now it's just at atmospheric pressure, steam expands, I think, 1,600 times its original volume of water. So that will just go shooting off like a geyser. And I've seen a poor woman get her face burned off by doing that. She's running around screaming on the side of the highway. And luckily for her, a couple stopped and saved her. So whatever you do, do not take the radiator cap off. Just don't do that. So, now, once you're pulled over to the side of the road, there's a few things to check. Now, we're going to go over the car and look at it. So you got the hood open, you're pulled over on the side of the road, your vehicle's overheating. Now, there are two situations where your vehicle will overheat. Number one, your vehicle will overheat when you have coolant in it. So, maybe something like the thermostat is stuck, the radiator is blocked, or this vehicle has electric fans, which are way down in there. Your electric fans or your fan isn't working properly. Something mechanical, something that you won't be able to solve. But if you look over here, here is our coolant recovery tank. Now this system actually has what we call a pressurized radiator, and this is a non-pressurized expansion tank. So the first thing you do is you look at the expansion tank, and now as we can see, it has coolant in it. So if the vehicle is overheating and it has coolant in it, you definitely do not want to take this radiator cap off, because as soon as you take that cap off, you got coolant in there that's just waiting to boil. As soon as you take it off, it's just going to come out like a geyser. So don't do that. Now, if you look at this and you have no coolant, and you look underneath and you just got steam coming out everywhere, then there's a good chance that you don't have coolant in the cooling system. Now, if you got coolant that's dripping down the front of the vehicle and everywhere else, there's a good chance you have coolant in the system. So especially when you have coolant in the system, you do not want to take the radiator cap off. So the first thing you want to do is you want to let the vehicle cool down enough to where you can comfortably touch the cap. But again, you still want to be very, very careful. So first thing you need to do is you need to turn the cap just barely, just very, very slowly. And let it release its pressure. Now, sometimes you'll hear it hiss or whatever, and then just carefully take it off and make sure you stay away from it. Now, as you can see, because this vehicle isn't overheating, we got coolant in there. Now, if your vehicle is cooled down enough to where you can take that off, you may get coolant spraying everywhere, but hopefully it's not scalding hot. So again, be very, very careful. If it starts to spray, back right off. Now, if you have coolant in the system, chances are there's some kind of mechanical problem that's causing the engine to overheat. So the vehicle's cooling system isn't cooling properly, or there's not enough airflow through the radiator to cool the actual engine coolant off, or something in that sense. So there's probably not something you can do in this case. You'll probably have to call a tow truck. Now if you open this cap up and there is nothing inside there, there's a good chance that it's leaking from somewhere. So maybe you have a bad water pump or a broken hose. So the first thing you want to do, as if I can find my light here somewhere, you want to check the cooling system hoses. Now as you can see, here's our thermostat housing. We see the upper radiator hose here. Squeeze it, move it around, see if it's intact, because if you have a ripped hose or something, Now there's tons of cooling system hoses. You can see down, oh, those are actually the AC hoses. But towards the back of the vehicle, you have a couple of heater hoses. You got a radiator hose that's down below. There's at least 4 hoses. Here's a heater. No, that's a PCV hose. There's at least 4 hoses that run to the engine. And from the radiator to the engine, there's 2. And from the heater core, which is way back there, as we can see way down there, to the engine as well. Now, some of those may be cracked as well. So check your 4 hoses and make sure that there's not coolant coming from somewhere. Now, if you see that there's coolant coming from somewhere around the engine or something like that, chances are your water pump is probably leaking. But again, like I said, I'm not trying to make a mechanic out of you or anything like that. But if you got water, you don't want to fill your cooling system. Now, this, of course, only comes from a situation where you don't have coolant in the cooling system. You do not want to pour cold water into the radiator while the vehicle is still blazing hot. You're going to want to let it cool down enough to where you can pour cold water, because as soon as you pour cold water into a blazing hot cooling system, it's going to just fly back out and become steam, and that'll burn you too. So be sure that the vehicle's cooled down enough before you start pouring water back in there, or else you can actually hurt the engine by doing that too. So, like I said, the number one thing is you need to let the vehicle cool off enough to where you can take this cap off safely. So don't open this hot. This is never open hot, so don't ignore this warning sign. Now, unfortunately, if you have no coolant in there, you're going to run out again. So chances are you probably want to get to a rest stop somewhere, fill whatever bottles you have up with water, and refill your radiator so you can keep going. But don't keep driving on it. Try to get to the nearest shop, the nearest town, wherever. But chances are, if you got coolant and the cooling system is boiling up everywhere, you're probably SOL. And the only way you can keep driving is if you let the vehicle cool off enough and drive it again until the vehicle starts to overheat. So unfortunately, when it starts to overheat and you're stuck on a highway and you don't have any water, you're pretty much hooped. Okay, so the number one thing is, when your vehicle starts to overheat, you don't want to keep driving it, because you can cause damage. And the other thing is, you never want to take anything off the cooling system while the vehicle, is hot, because that can really, really, really badly hurt you. So do not open anything in the cooling system while it's hot. Excuse me. I got the hiccups. So if the vehicle overheats and there's coolant spewing out everywhere, there's a good chance that you got something that's wrong with the vehicle and it won't be able to continue driving. Or you'll be able to drive for a short time until the vehicle starts to overheat again. Chances are it's probably something serious, like a head gasket or something in that sense. So now if the vehicle has no engine coolant in it, the reason why you overheat it is because there's no engine coolant and it's leaking from somewhere. Now, the most common place I've seen it leak from when somebody's stuck on the side of the road is the water pump going and they had no idea that they needed to replace it or something like that. So make sure you perform a pre-trip inspection before you go so you're not stuck on the side of the road. Now, with a leaky cooling system, you could still drive, but you're going to be stuck filling it up every so often. And remember, you're going to want to check it more frequently because you don't want the vehicle to overheat, because you're going to have to let it cool down before you start adding more fluid back in, or more water. So that can get you by for a while. But basically what I'm trying to say is, don't just dive into it and take the cap off, because you'll get seriously hurt from it. That's the most important message I'm trying to say here. So, and the other thing is, just please don't keep driving it, because, well, unless you don't want the car anymore, you probably end up with a total loss by blowing up the engine or something like that. So that's basically the only things you can do in the event of an overheat. Now, that's my 2 cents on it. I've rambled enough, so that's the end of this video in the series. I hope you found it informative, and I hope that this knowledge has empowered you to not get burned by hot, scalding coolant. So be very, very careful, please. I beg of you. So, I'm 6Speed Dakota. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/6SpeedDakota, Twitter at 6SpeedDakota, Google+, +6Speed Dakota.